Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about a couple different ways to read and study your Bible. And I don't necessarily believe that you always need to be changing things up. I think that the Bible is God's living word and he can speak to us through it, even if we just read it the same way all the time. But I personally like to change things up. I don't want to get stagnant, and I feel like changing things up on a regular basis helps me get more out of my Bible reading. And if it helps you guys, I thought I would share this video. This video is also kind of for me because I'm just finishing something up right now and then thinking about what I'm going to be doing next. So I'm kind of making this for myself as well. So before we get into all the different ideas, I wanted to share the two different Bibles that I mainly use. They are these two. So I have the Christian Standard Bible. This is the note-taking Bible in, I think it's called like floral cloth bound. I'll leave everything I talk about linked below if I can. This one has cream pages and space on the edges for notes. Most of mine are hanging out in the New Testament. I have a video, quite an old video, about how I read and study the Bible a while ago, one of the different ways that I'm going to be talking about. So this is one of the Bibles I use on a regular basis. The other one is the ESV Study Bible. I believe the one that I have, this is cloth bound as well. I don't know if they make this one anymore. They might, but this is personal sized. So Jared has a bigger version of this in like a faux leather cover, and our Bibles are exactly the same. My font is just smaller. We have the same maps, the same page numbers, all that is the same. Everything in mine is just shrunk down a bit. And I generally like small font. Like on my phone, I turn the font as small as possible. So I like it like this, although I know other people like really large font. I think they make this probably in a variety of different sizes if you like one or the other. But I just wanted to mention these because I'm sure people will be asking. Another resource I wanted to mention before I get started is Women of the Word by Jen Wilkin. It has been years since I've read this book, and as I was pulling it out to recommend it, I was thinking that I should really reread this soon. It's how to study the Bible with both our hearts and our minds. And I remember really enjoying it when I read it years ago, and I don't even remember now what I have taken from this and actually use on the regular. I'm assuming there is things, but I definitely need to go back and reread it. So I recommend this, but I kind of also forget what it's about. I mean, I know the general idea, but I forget exactly what it says, so a recommendation that I need to also take for myself. Okay, so that little intro out of the way, I'm going to separate this into kind of two sections. It's reading the Bible and studying the Bible, even though when you read the Bible, you're also studying it, and even though when you study it, you're also reading it. I think sometimes, like, in my mind, when I'm saying reading the Bible, the focus is just kind of more like reading it through, getting the whole picture, that kind of thing. When I'm saying studying, I'm more meaning like slow down, like saturate in one section for a while. So there's major overlap here, but we're going to talk about reading it and then studying it, diving deep. As I do, I made a list because I forget everything. The first thing I'm going to mention is for reading, the basic thing that almost everyone does, and that is read the Bible in a year. There's a bunch of different plans for that. This is the most common way to read the Bible, I find, and it is the one I find the hardest. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in some other ideas down the road here. But I don't know how many times I started a Bible in the year plan and fell off the wagon, generally about this time of year, generally like March. And yeah, so it's a good thing to do. I have finished it once that way, but if you find it doesn't work for you, or if you've tried it before and you just can't get through, there are other ways that may work better. I find for me, I'm kind of a bit of an all or nothing kind of person. So just a couple chapters each day, like I would rather do less or more. That's what I've learned over the years. So if you've tried a Bible in your plan before and it hasn't worked, don't give up. Don't think you can't read through the Bible. But I wanted to mention that first because it is the most common. The next thing is to read the Bible chronologically. So for this, you can just get plans online, read through it chronologically, as they say. What I did when I read it chronologically is I used the Bible Recap. So this is by Tara Lee Coble. This is the 1-year guide to reading and understanding the entire Bible. So for this, it tells you the day that you're on and what chapters you're going to be reading that day. And then it gives you a summary of what you read. This was so good. And then there is, I printed out the kings, which Israel and Judah's kings, and if they were good when they, evil when they started, or good and what they were when they ended. That always falls out. And then after the summary, there's a God shot, is what she calls it, and it's like where you can see God working in this passage. So like sometimes you're reading just 3 chapters in a row, Exodus 25 to 27, but then there's sometimes where you're reading a variety of different Psalms, like 7, 27, 31, 34. Yeah, and there's like some skipping around. We've got like Deuteronomy 32 to 34, Psalm 91, Jeremiah 38 to 40, Psalms 74 and 79. And so I found it really interesting, especially when it gets to the New Testament, and like one day you're reading Acts 17, and then the next day it's 1 Thessalonians 1 to 5, 2 Thessalonians 1 to 3, then you're back to Acts 18 to 19, then you're in 1 Corinthians 1 to 4. So reading the Bible chronologically was really cool. I guess the assumption that I had when I was younger, and I hadn't really thought of it, was that the Bible was chronological, but that also doesn't really make any sense because the Gospels are like covering a lot of the same things that happened at the same time, but obviously they're not in order. So this was really good. I read through this kind of twice in 1 year. I started it at the end of 1 year, and then at the beginning of the next year, I started doing it with a group as well. So I pretty much blasted through this twice in the span of a year, and it was really good. The summaries are really helpful, and I've heard she also has a podcast. I have yet to ever listen to it. I think it's the same summaries in podcast form or something similar. So if you don't want to buy the book, you can go that route. I'm all about the books, so I went this route. So like I said at the beginning, reading the Bible in a year, that was really hard for me. But one day I was sitting in a Bible study group, and I heard someone say, this was at like the first week or 2 of October 1 year, I heard someone say they were going to read the Bible in 90 days. They had started it at the beginning of October. They were going to finish it by the end of the year. And for some reason I was like, I'm going to do that. I'd never read through the Bible all the way. I had never completed a Bible in the year plan. Like, why did I think I could read through it in 90 days when I couldn't read it through it in 365? I don't know, but I decided I was going to do it. I couldn't find a 90-day plan, so I made one for myself, and I totally did it. I read through the Bible in 90 days, and I wouldn't recommend always reading through the Bible that quickly. I actually went on, I think maybe the next year, or I can't remember if it was right after, starting in January, or if it was the next January. I read through it in 60 days. I wouldn't recommend always reading through the Bible quite so quickly, but when you do, the whole story and how the Bible all ties together was so much more evident to me anyway. And I found that easier, even though it took longer. Obviously you're reading more chapters each day. I found it easier than reading through the Bible in a year. So if you've never been able to complete a Bible in a year plan, maybe try reading it quicker. It seems like it shouldn't make sense, but that's what worked for me. If you want to go the opposite route and you want to slow your Bible reading down, you want to read through the Bible, but you want to slow it down, another thing you can do is write the Bible out. So you could start right at the beginning if you wanted, you could start chronologically if you wanted, or you could just pick a book of the Bible and start writing it out. I have a notebook that I've used for a lot of my personal Bible study over the years. I've had a few different ones, but there have been times where I've just started writing things out. Like the very first page in this, I started writing out Acts chapter 1. I don't remember, this was a long time ago. I don't remember why I started out with Acts. This page I've got Acts 2 verses 22 to 36. I actually wonder if this is what our church was going through at the time. And because I have a tendency, as someone that reads a lot, I do have a tendency to read fast and therefore not always retain everything. It can be really good for me to slow down and write the chapters or the verses out that I'm trying to read. So it's obviously going to take a lot longer, and if you wanted to write out the entire Bible, I doubt you could probably do it in a year. Maybe you could. I couldn't. But if you want to slow down, that's another option for you. Okay, now on to studying the Bible. One thing I'll also mention is I am a little bit anti-devotional, depending how you use that word, and that is mostly because a lot of the devotional books that I've seen are very surface, often don't really even have much for scripture in there. Some of them have like half of a verse, and so many people see that as an alternative to reading the Bible. Like, you do your devotions, but you don't actually like read the Bible. If you're reading a devotional on top of reading and studying the Bible, I think that's different. But that hasn't been my experience, like, for the most part, so I'm always a little bit leery, but there are some great devotionals out there that you can do on top of Bible reading, but I just kind of wanted to address that. I have mentioned, I think even in my last video I mentioned that I have been going through a Revelation study. It's taken me a while, it's been deep, I've learned a lot. This one is from Felicia Masonheimer, and I'm just finishing up the very last verses in Revelation right now. And that is a really good study. Doing some type of Bible study, I feel like a person also needs to be very careful with, because some of them can be very surface level or very pick and choose the verses to support whatever the person who created the study wants to say. And sometimes I struggle with some of them feeling very like Sunday school answers, like, you know, if you just write Jesus, all the answers are right. So I'm a little bit picky when it comes to doing a study, but do your research. I will leave the Revelation study linked below. I know I have tried some of the Daily Grace Co. studies. I still own some and haven't finished them. I did a review a really long time ago. My biggest thing is with being in Canada, shipping was expensive, and then I got charged just as much in duties as I paid for the products, so I will never order from there again unless they have like ebook options or like PDF downloads. But I know quite a few people like them. I found them personally not to be as deep as I would like. You guys can go ahead and leave study ideas down below if you guys have some. I know, I think in another video there was some recommended. I don't have a lot of recommendations for this, but I know there are some good ones out there. Another thing to do is just do a study yourself. Slow down and study a book or a chapter or a verse. I have done this, so our church goes through books of the Bible. You know, they just preach on a few verses, next Sunday it's the next few verses. And so we as the congregation always know what's coming next, and so sometimes I will take time to study those verses before the Sunday. Sometimes I take time after the Sunday and continue to study them throughout the week. During this time I will often write the verse out. Sometimes I'll do like a verse map thing, like a visual kind of, I think I have an example in here, let's see. I'll put like the verse or verses in the middle. Oh yeah, okay, so when I was studying Ephesians, I've got Ephesians 3. I wrote out, I think maybe the whole chapter there. And then I slowly studied it kind of section by section. So here I've got Ephesians 3, 1 to 6. And then I kind of wrote out some stuff from there. And then I did Ephesians 3, 7 to 13 and 14 to 21. Okay. So that just gives you an example of how I've done that in the past. There is a woman on Instagram who's doing a really good job with all sorts of different verse mapping type things. I will try to leave her Instagram account linked below if I can find it. Totally blanking on what it's called right now, of course. Another thing you could do to study is do a word study, especially if you get like back to the original like Hebrew or Greek word, figure out what it actually means, how often it is in the Bible, that kind of thing. You could do a character study, pick a character from the Bible and do some studies on them. The character study, and then also like a place study. This person that I'm thinking about on Instagram has been doing a lot of these lately. Oh man, I wish I could remember her name. Hopefully I can find it and overlay some screenshots for you guys, but I have never really done a character study or a place study, and I think I might be leaning going that way next. So that's all for my ideas on different ways to read and study the Bible. I'm sure I didn't list them all. I'm sure there's tons more. I would love for you guys to leave recommendations in the comments. How do you read the Bible? How do you study it? How would you like to, etc. Let's just chat about that in the comments and hopefully inspire each of us in our walk with God.